you think you know the story of the emperor's new clothes, a proud ruler fooled by cunning weavers, parading through the streets in invisible garments, until a child exposed the truth. A tale of vanity, pride, and innocence told to children for generations. But what if I told you this story was not merely a harmless fable? What if hidden beneath its playful words lies something older, darker, and far more unsettling? For centuries, beneath the cobbled streets of Europe and the dusty archives of forgotten kingdoms, fragments of the tale have been discovered not as entertainment, but as warnings, symbols carved into stone, faded murals on monastery walls, and manuscripts whispered to contain secrets of ritual and power. The emperor's new clothes is more than a moral lesson. It may be the echo of an ancient truth about illusion, sacrifice, and the terrifying cost of seeing reality too clearly. Once upon a time, there was an emperor who lived in a splendid palace at the heart of a thriving city. He was no ordinary monarch, for he cared little about matters of state. Instead, his greatest passion was his appearance. He desired garments of the finest silk, woven with gold thread and dyed in colors rare and costly. His wardrobe was vast, and he changed his clothes with such frequency that he seemed more mannequin than man. One day, two mysterious strangers arrived. They claimed to be master weavers, capable of crafting the most magnificent clothes ever seen. Not only were their fabrics dazzling, they said, but they possessed an extraordinary property. They would be invisible to anyone unworthy of their position or hopelessly foolish. Tempted by the promise, the emperor paid them generously to begin their work. The strangers set up looms, but in truth, they wove nothing. Ministers and courtiers visited the workshop, yet none dared admit that they saw only empty air. Each man, fearful of being declared incompetent, praised the non-existent fabric. Word spread of the marvelous clothing that only the wise and worthy could see. At last, the day came for the emperor's procession. He stood proudly in his garments, admiring himself in invisible splendor. The people gathered, lining the streets, each afraid to confess that their eyes beheld nothing, and so they cheered, murmuring about the elegance of their ruler. Then, amid the whispers of the crowd, a child's voice rang out with piercing honesty. "But he is wearing nothing at all." The truth spread like wildfire. Murmurs turned to gasps. The emperor, flushed with shame, but too proud to admit defeat, he continued his parade. Thus ended the tale as it is told to children, a parable of vanity unmasked by innocence. But the tale was not always told in this form. The earliest roots of the story can be traced to medieval Spain. In the 13th century collection known as Libro de los Ejemplos del Conde Luca Nori de Patronio, there, a story is told of tricksters who convince a ruler of an invisible cloth, and the people pretend to see it out of fear. This version carried a clear message about deception and the cowardice of leaders. Centuries later, in 1837, Hans Christian Andersen immortalized the tale in the form we know today. His adaptation softened the biting satire of earlier versions, transforming it into a fairy tale for children. Yet Andersen's pen was sharp. Beneath his words lay criticism of vanity, corruption, and the fragility of power. The innocent child, uncorrupted by fear, became the voice of truth in a society bound by lies. Over time, the tale was translated and reshaped across cultures. In some versions, the weavers were seen as sorcerers, wielding illusions rather than cloth. In others, the child's voice was interpreted not as innocent truth, but as divine judgment breaking through human arrogance. During the Enlightenment, scholars read the story as a satire of political hypocrisy. In the 20th century, it became a metaphor for propaganda, where entire nations acted blind in the face of deception. Thus, what began as a medieval cautionary tale evolved into Andersen's fairy tale, and from there into a cultural symbol. The emperor became every ruler too enamored with appearance, every society too fearful to admit truth, and every age too blind to see its own illusions. Yet, beneath these retellings, one must wonder what ancient core inspired such a tale. Why does the image of a naked ruler resonate so deeply across centuries? On closer inspection, many details of the emperor's new clothes echo myths far older than medieval Europe. In Greek mythology, we find the tale of King Midas, whose desire for gold blinded him until he nearly starved from his own folly. Just as Midas was ensnared by illusion, the emperor is trapped by the false promise of glory woven from nothingness. Both kings fall victim to vanity, and both serve as warnings about misplaced desire. From Norse legend comes the story of Loki crafting illusions to trick gods and men. The deceit of the weavers recalls the trickster archetype, a figure whose cunning exposes weakness in rulers and societies. The emperor, like Odin when deceived, becomes blind to truth until the mask of power is torn away. In ancient Egyptian ritual, priests would clothe statues of gods in garments, symbolizing divine authority. These garments were not merely cloth but vessels of power. To be stripped naked before the people was to be stripped of legitimacy itself. Perhaps the emperor said visible clothing reflects this ancient concept that authority rests not in the body of the ruler but in the garments that symbolize his sacred role. Even biblical echoes emerge. In Genesis, Adam and Eve realize their nakedness after eating the forbidden fruit. Their shame mirrors the emperor's humiliation. Knowledge unveils vulnerability. Just as the child's voice reveals truth, so too did the fruit reveal reality in Eden. Could it be that the emperor is not merely a foolish king but a symbolic figure, the eternal ruler who loses sight of truth, ensnared by illusion and ritual? The weavers are not simply frauds but shadows of trickster gods and sorcerers from the world's oldest myths. And the child is not only innocent but perhaps the archetypal voice of divine wisdom, cutting through centuries of deceit. The tale may be far more than a warning about vanity. It could be a reflection of humankind's ancient fear that power itself is a costume, and when the costume is stripped away, nothing remains but fragile, mortal flesh. In 1923, while excavating a monastery library in northern Spain, researchers stumbled upon a parchment that bore a chilling resemblance to the tale of the emperor's new clothes. Written in faded Latin script, it described a ruler who commissioned enchanted garments that could not be seen by the impure. Though the manuscript was incomplete, its details matched the story we recognize today. This was centuries before Andersen, suggesting that the fable had circulated long before his pen gave it shape. Later, in 1957, archaeologists in Central Asia uncovered murals within the ruins of an abandoned caravanserai. Among the vibrant pigments, a scene stood out, a ruler parading in splendid fashion while courtiers covered their mouths in laughter. At the corner of the mural, a child pointed with a bold hand. Though weathered by centuries, the symbolism was undeniable. The pattern of deception and revelation appeared across cultures separated by vast distances. Even more startling were clay tablets unearthed in Mesopotamia, dated to nearly 3,000 years ago. Scholars deciphered a fragmentary text recounting a king clothed in air, mocked by his people when a youth shouted the truth. Though the story's form was rough, the motif of invisible garments, fear of exposure, and the child's revelation was unmistakable. From Spain to Asia, from Mesopotamia to northern Europe, the tale persisted. Experts now believe that it may have originated from a forgotten ancient civilization where illusion and ritual were intertwined with power. Perhaps the story functioned as a coded warning, passed along trade routes, carried by storytellers, and reshaped by each new age. The Emperor's New Clothes is not merely a creation of Andersen's imagination. It is a surviving shard of a myth so ancient that its original form is lost in time, echoing across the ruins and relics of humanity's earliest civilizations. At first glance, the tale seems straightforward, vanity punished, innocence triumphant. Yet symbolism reveals something more profound. The invisible garment may not be cloth at all. In many traditions, garments represent authority, spirit, or even the soul. To wear nothing is to stand exposed before heaven and earth, stripped of protection. The emperor's invisible attire could symbolize the emptiness of human pride when it is detached from genuine virtue. The weavers themselves function as archetypal tricksters, embodiments of chaos who unravel order through deception. In Norse, West African, and Native American traditions alike, tricksters test the integrity of rulers. If the emperor had possessed true wisdom, their lies would have failed. His downfall reveals his hollowness. The procession resembles a ritual. Processions in ancient Rome and Egypt carried sacred meaning, reaffirming the ruler's bond with the divine. Yet here, the ritual collapses. Instead of reinforcing authority, it exposes fragility. The emperor becomes a parody of sacred kingship. And then comes the child. More than innocence, the child symbolizes the uncorrupted voice of truth. In mystery religions, children often represented divine messengers, untouched by societal fear. The words of the child in the story echo like a sacred pronouncement, reality unveiled by purity of sight. Could it be that this tale encodes an ancient initiation? The ruler is tested, the garments represent spiritual covering. The falsehood exposes weakness, and the child serves as the divine herald. What we read as comedy may once have been a solemn warning about the illusions of power and the necessity of truth. When the story is stripped bare of its surface, it ceases to be a children's tale. It becomes a mythic drama about pride, deception, revelation, and the eternal tension between illusion and truth. The story of the Emperor's New Clothes, which many dismiss as a playful fable for children, may instead be a remnant of something vast, old and mysterious. Beneath Andersen's elegant words lies an ancient heartbeat, pulsing with echoes of Mesopotamian clay tablets, medieval manuscripts, and forgotten murals. The emperor is not just a vain ruler. He is every leader who clings to illusion, every society too frightened to admit what it sees, every human who hides behind masks of power and pride. His invisible garment is not simply a joke, but a symbol of the fragile veil between perception and reality. The weavers embody chaos, the child embodies truth, and the procession embodies ritual stripped of meaning. When seen in this light, the tale is no longer harmless. It is a mirror, forcing us to ask, what illusions do we ourselves parade before the world? What truths remain unspoken because we fear ridicule or judgment? And who will be the child brave enough to speak when silence prevails? The Emperor's New Clothes is not only a fairy tale but a convergence of myth, archaeology, spirituality, and human psychology. It is a reminder that all power rests upon fragile fabric, and when that fabric dissolves, what remains is only the naked truth. And if that unsettles you, Remember, this is but one story. Many others hide similar shadows in their roots. The next tale you hear may not be as innocent as you think.